What is up, everybody? Welcome to AK Plays. I'm AK. Let's play.
A rogue agent has been neutralized.
You know, you walked right into that.
I did, didn't I?
Alright, everybody. Today I've got kind of an interesting one for you. And I haven't really seen anybody talk about this yet, so it's definitely something that I think is important, but hasn't been talked about that I've seen. Now, me and my team have talked about it a little bit this week, and I think it's kind of a bigger deal and would really make the Division 2 better. Now, it's a little late to change the Division 1, but in some times during this video I'll probably speak using the Division 1 lingo because a lot more people are going to understand that. If you haven't played Division 2 beta yet, it would kind of be tough to understand. So I'm going to speak probably more towards the Division, even though I'm thinking this is more for the Division 2. Now, I think that adding something like this will help the Division to have sustained, really good growth. And I think that that's important, because the Division 1 obviously had huge growth, and right at the beginning it was so popular and so well known that even people that were not part of the gaming culture and were just completely mainstream would see Division videos on their Facebook or things like that, and would of course make them inquire about the Division. So I think that to have Division 2 have that kind of launch, plus the sustained growth and continued notoriety that the Division 1 really didn't have, I think the Division 2 needs to have a more competitive element to PvP. I think that we need to have the developers really take PvP seriously and really respect it and try to make it grow and kind of give it a good environment to really prosper. The ways that they could do that, I'm thinking there's a few. But if you look at the reason I bring this up and the reason I think it's really important and could make the Division 2 even more successful and potentially have huge, huge growth over the long term, is because you look at games that have competitive scenes that are really, really popular. If you go all the way back to Halo's competitive scenes and Call of Duty's competitive scenes and more recently Fortnite's competitive scenes and what I'm sure is coming, Apex Legends competitive scene, I think that you can see why things grow and why they sustain growth and continue to be popular. The more competitive that the PvP is and the more that people talk about it and that streamers and people that make videos are going to enjoy it and play it, the more that the game stays around and continues to be relevant. Now, very competitive players fuel and drive a game's growth, in my opinion. Obviously, I know that the PvE community is very strong, but the PvE community is going to play the game, enjoy the game, and continue to make the game grow in its own community. The PvP community, I feel like, is a lot more flashy and draws more mainstream people to a game. Now, that might be my opinion, I might be crazy, but that's the way I feel, because a lot of people aren't going to be appealed to by the PvE, although a lot of people are. I just think that a lot of people are trying to get to the end game, which is usually the PvP, and especially in the Division, it is the PvP. So I think that a couple ways they could do it to mimic games that have kind of had a really competitive and well-known scene in the past is by having a few different things. The first thing I think is kind of a competitive league play or something like that. Excuse the terminology, however they would name it, but something that is competitive and separate from the normal public matches. Now, if that would be different servers, I don't really know how all that works. I don't know anything about game coding or servers or anything like that. Not very tech savvy, guys. But I think if they had something that was a competitive play, a different area for those people to play, where they had something like 4v4s where people don't respawn each round or something like that, and they have at the beginning either things that are banned in competitive or a different area where you can vote to ban things or do things like that. Some games have tried doing that. And either way, I think that would be important, because if you think in Division 1 terms, if you had a 4v4 and at the beginning of the match there were either things that were tournament banned or competitive banned, whatever you want to call it, and those aren't allowed, like say shock turrets and Nomad weren't allowed in that competitive game. Now, that might be a little tough on some people. I know some people really love those things, but for the people that don't, it would be really pleasant. Now, so I don't know if I would go with just straight up banning things, but maybe allowing it to be voted on at the beginning of a match, so if a team really dislikes something, they can get rid of it. I know a lot of games do that and they're competitive. I think most recently Rainbow Six Siege has been doing that. But you basically would be able to vote and say, okay, our team doesn't want to fight shock turrets, so we're going to vote off shock turrets. And the other team says, well, I don't want to fight against Reclaimer, we're going to vote off Reclaimer. And whatever people don't like. But I think that would be really cool and make it to have some kind of balance, and at the same time allow for a really competitive fight that would be really cool to watch. Now, Division 1, with its RPG elements and the tactics and the different metas and different builds, had a huge, absolutely huge potential for competitive PvP, and especially the next thing I'm going to mention, which is some kind of tournament or something that people would want to watch, because competitive play inherently is very fun to watch because you're watching the top tier players, people that usually do what you can't do. That's why people watch Ninja and all the other people that stream Fortnite, and that's why people watch like Optic and FaZe when they were playing Call of Duty. And I think when you have that kind of feel to a competitive scene, you have a tournament or something that people can watch, that is really cool. Now, it's easy to watch, and it helps grow the community and helps people to kind of understand more about the game. I think that all of that is positive. There's not really any negatives that are drawn from that. I just think that it's a great idea overall to have a more competitive scene. And however they go about doing that, it's really beyond me, but I think that the first thing should be some kind of competitive arena or competitive game mode that allows for a more structured 4v4, where people don't continue to come back, where they have the availability to ban things and to kind of shape the game to be more competitive in their minds. I think that that would be great. I think that opening up some kind of tournament, I'm not saying a physical tournament where everyone goes to a convention center, I'm thinking maybe just some kind of online tournament or something, some kind of event. I think that that would be cool, and it would show that the developers do care about PvP and really want to give it an environment where it can grow. I think that that would be really cool, and then I think that lastly, you would want to have some kind of stat tracking. And I have seen that in the Division 2. I saw that they have a ton of stats that they're tracking, and I think that's awesome. I think that is a huge start. I think that that is unbelievably better than Division 1's tracking, because if you look at Division 1's tracking or what people go off of when they look at you to see if you're a good player, it's pretty bad. You look at, for the most part, you look at people's rogue player kills, and that doesn't really help with anything, because if that team is going rogue all the time, they're not going to have a ton of rogue kills. And if that player is a farmer, they might have a bunch of rogue kills because all they do is rogue police. It doesn't really quantify into telling you if they're a good player or not. And so I think that a lot of people don't really like the way that you track stats in Division 1, and there really isn't a way other than your reputation. In Division 2, it looks like there's going to be a lot of stats, but it looks like it's mostly going to be in skirmish. Now, if you had a more competitive mode and you had stats tracked separately in that, I think that leaderboards like that could be really, really cool. And the reason I specify it in that way outside of skirmish is because, for me at least, and I'm sure other people, I go to skirmish to test builds for about 90% of it. And occasionally, if the build test goes well, then that's a really fun, successful game of skirmish. But for me, it's mostly build testing, so I wouldn't want those stats to go over to where competitive stats are tracked. So if you had two separate leaderboards that track stats for competitive and track stats for public matches, I think that that would be a huge plus as well. So basically, to summarize, I'm saying that competitive play would help the Division 2 to grow, to sustain growth, and to bring new players in by seeing really high-level PvP glorified and put in a very bright light. And to do that, I think that, once again, it should have a competitive mode separate from skirmish and domination, and maybe it could even be competitive skirmish and domination as well. I would like to see that as well, not just that. But I think that having a competitive modes like that, having where you can have 4v4s, no respawns, and you can vote to ban things, I think that would be great. And if you really wanted to take it a step further, you could have different matches like 1v1s. And to have a more true 1v1 setting like that, where nothing gets involved, would be nice to have somewhere that 1v1s could be really legit. So I think that that would be cool, and PvP players would like that. If they also had 2v2, 3v3, 4v4, I think that would be really cool, and it would open it up to whatever your group size is, and you wouldn't have to just matchmake for a group member, which you could have the availability to do, but I think that most people would much rather bring in their own group. I think that would be great. To have leaderboards tracking things separately, I think that would be awesome. And then to see some kind of tournament or competitive play, some kind of events. I think that that would be very cool, and it would show that the PvP community is no longer being slighted and is more taken seriously. I think that that would help the PvP community grow, keep really good players and competitive players there longer, and really keep the future of the Division 2 looking bright. So that's my opinion. I can't wait to hear what you guys think, because I don't know if you guys are going to love the idea or if you're going to think I'm crazy. So please let me know in the comments, and I will catch you guys tomorrow.